This episode of the Load Bank Report is brought to you by Generator Source. Visit generatorsource.com to learn more.
Natural gas lines, if you're starting to move and trying to add additional things to it, there's going to be a little bit more of an intricate permitting process behind that, because they do have to come out and make sure you're not affecting everybody else down grid from you.
With the natural gas needing so much more based on their engine, that an install usually is double the price as well. Because not only are we having to help, load in those pipelines and get it hooked up, but we also need to have a plumber to help with all of that. Then we need our contractors, all the permitting.
Because each municipality is going to have their own specific requirements behind that. California, for example, is very strict on the diesel requirements and emissions that they're allowed to be able to emit versus other states in more rural areas and applications that they're using.
Oh, well, thank you everybody for tuning in again for another episode of Load Bank Report. We're joined here today by our sales team, our leadership team here. We have Caitlin Pearson, our sales coordinator, and Dakota Merkley. You're the senior vice president, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Today I want to focus on more so. I wanted to kind of continue this conversation for the I don't want to call it like a rating trap, but there are a lot of conversations having and coming from online as well. Users are trying to understand the differences for their applications between applying a diesel system versus a natural gas system, and there are some other challenges that I want to kind of break out on those topics alone. Before we get too deep into the conversation, I want to kind of throw the ball in both of your court real quick. Just kind of briefly introduce yourselves, talk about your roles here at the company, and Caitlin, want to kind of start things off first?
Sure. I'm Caitlin. I've been with the company 6 years. I started in business development and I built our email marketing at that time. And then as I've progressed, I've moved on with the sales department to different roles of lead management, assisting marketing, assisting on contracts and growth and our warranty program. And now I'm the sales coordinator. So I basically assist really Dakota and the sales team and just help them be successful.
Nice. Perfect.
Good. Yeah, so I'm Dakota. I'm the senior vice president over here. My main focus is revenue generation for the company. So I oversee all areas of revenue generation from service, sales, and rentals. With that, we have an amazing team from equipment sales to service sales team and a rental sales team to be able to help propel that forward. I oversee this at all 4 locations that we have nationwide. Couldn't do it without the team behind us and specifically Caitlin's support and everything that she's allowed us to do. When I first started with the company 6 years ago, I started out just as a basic entry-level salesperson, worked my way up through management through the last 6 years to be able to get where I'm at today. Very grateful and thankful for where I'm at, and thank you for the time sitting down with you guys today and being able to discuss the future opportunities at Generator Source and where the industry's headed.
Perfect. That was great. I think a lot of people listening right now and watching too, they're ideally watching this to kind of understand the state of the economy right now in terms of just energy, the entire energy space. Let's kind of talk about what are some of the core drivers in the conversations you guys are having with customers. Let's say that we are dealing with a client possibly who's not very familiar with the fuel systems that are required for their specific types of applications. Now I know there are many different pieces we can kind of go at this, regional specific, weather, climate, access to fuel, pipelines for natural gas. But what are some of the major drivers you guys are talking with clients right now to help guide them with this conversation, trying to choose what makes more sense for them?
I think for me, the first question to ask if it's a new customer, they're not quite sure what they want, and they're asking me diesel versus natural gas is the application. That's going to make a huge difference. So to your point, location matters, but application's really going to matter for this because we need to know if it's natural gas, is it still going to be powered in the event of an emergency, or is their pipeline going to be shut off?
What are some of the main drivers with natural gas specifically? Some of the requirements, and is definitely some of the challenges these users could face potentially from an installation and just overall, application scenario.
One of the main drivers is it runs much cleaner than diesel. I mean, it's more, EPA efficient, if we're going to say that.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of access to natural gas, I know depending on where you live in the country, access to natural gas can be somewhat challenging and difficult. How can our clients kind of mitigate and kind of work around those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, one of the easiest ways that they can be able to mitigate that is just to see if they have an accurate and natural gas line in place for their site. throughout the country, depending upon if it's a more rural area or if you're coastal based. It can play a bigger factor into that natural gas line. Natural gas lines are so grid based; they're always going to be because they have to have that pressure behind it. It comes from a pumping station that has to ultimately be able to get there. The easiest way to kind of tell that is to get with your local provider. If they can and ask a simple question is, what is the water column pressure behind that line? So on average, on the smaller units, let's say anywhere between 20 to 150 kW, you're looking somewhere between 7 to 14 inches of water column pressure. Above that, it can start to increase kind of greatly depending on age of equipment, on the generator specifically, and the demand that you're looking to be able to back up. The bigger the kW, the more natural gas supply is going to be required on that site. Not everybody has the capabilities to do that. Even here at Generator Source, we have a limit of the equipment that we're able to test and run up to a certain capacity. That's just because of where we're located on that line. The closer you are to that main pumping station, the higher you can typically get that, but however it affects the downgrade of where everybody else is going to be able to do it. So there are a lot more limitations behind where natural gas can be installed and not installed too. And a lot of rural applications just frankly don't have lines at all.
Yeah.
They have to go to LP applications, which really greatly limits their capabilities of the size of the equipment they're able to use.
Okay. I know, like with diesel, there's a lot. Obviously, getting access to fuel for diesel is pretty easy for many users, right?
It's relatively easy. I mean, I would say 90+% of gas stations throughout the country have diesel. So you're always going to have access to diesel. Again, though, the bigger the equipment, you're going to have to get fueling trucks involved there. However, if your local gas station has a diesel pump, they're getting it from somewhere. You just got to go to a bigger supplier to be able to provide that. Diesel is a more self-efficient, self-sustained unit. You're not requiring a grid backup power supply at that point. You're requiring the capabilities of people in your local hometown with you.
And what about like for permitting for diesel versus natural gas? What does that look like in an installation scenario?
Great question. So that is heavily based around each municipality where you're located. Natural gas lines, if you're starting to move and trying to add additional things to it, there's going to be a little bit more of an intricate permitting process behind that, because they do have to come out and make sure you're not affecting everybody else down grid from you.
Yeah.
Versus diesel, it's a little bit more friendly typically, depending on EPA emissions and stuff like that we don't have to touch base on today. However, with it being a self-sustained unit that you're setting outside of your business or your application, the permitting process is typically a little bit easier.
Okay. Let's kind of focus on the cost analysis between these two types of systems. More so like between the fuel itself, obviously, but also like maintenance and installation too. There's kind of like a 3-component piece of this. Can you guys speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, natural gas prices vary greatly across the nation. It's just because it's grid based and it's provider based, and everybody marks it up at different levels. It's a little bit more complicated to be able to analyze versus just going to Google, going to your local fuel supplier and saying, what is the cost of red dye number 2, which is the ultra low sulfur grade diesel. So it's your just on-road grade, just dyed red. So it's used for off-road applications. Typically, that's going to be a little bit cheaper, especially depending upon size of kW. When you're looking at the actual cost of the equipment itself in the generator, on average, in the natural gas piece of equipment is going to be 1.5 to 2x the engine size to produce the same kW capabilities, and thus increasing the cost. So across the bandwidth, what we see is about a 50% increase in cost on natural gas units versus diesel units.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of standard. That's just what the equipment has to demand to be able to get that kW rating out of that equipment. And that's all it comes down to. Ultimately, kW is just a mechanical equation that you have to be able to calculate through the power supply.
Okay.
And as somebody who quotes the installs, to Dakota's point, with the natural gas needing so much more based on their engine, that an install usually is double the price as well. Because not only are we having to help, load in those pipelines and get it hooked up, but we also need to have a plumber to help with all of that. Then we need our contractors, all the permitting. So installing a natural gas generator from start to finish is usually double the price as well.
A lot of moving pieces, it sounds like.
For natural gas,
A lot
yeah.
of moving pieces. Yeah. Okay. And let's kind of focus now on like we don't have to get too in deep with this, but in terms of like tier compliance between these two systems, can we just explain to our audiences right now what is tier and how does it apply for both of these types of systems?
Great question. So tier compliancy is rated upon really a scale of 0 to 4. And that's just keeping it very, very simple, very, very high level. Yeah. Natural gas is a little bit of a fuzzy market just due to the fact that it does run a little bit cleaner. Most states don't have a lot of EPA requirements based around that. It is a much cleaner fuel when it's burned.
Okay.
However, diesel's where really tier compliancy comes into factor. And then taking that one step further, as each municipality is going to have their own specific requirements behind that. California, for example, is very strict on the diesel requirements and emissions that they're allowed to be able to emit versus other states in more rural areas and the applications that they're using.
Okay.
It really just depends upon size of KW and equipment and application basis. And then in addition to that, where it's going to be located as well.
Let's kind of shift a little bit too. I want to focus really on like the standby versus prime power. I know we don't do too much prime power from my understanding. We mostly focus on backup power here, generator source. But speaking to both systems, can a standby generator run 24/7 if a utility provider is expected to be out for weeks, and why?
This is a great question. So it really depends upon how that generator is sized for the application. So if you are going off of your bare requirements and you are just bare bones backing up exactly what you need, that generator bluntly is going to have a little bit more challenging of a time. Okay. If you upsize that generator by about 25%, it's going to give you much better longevity to be able to last a much longer time, especially in these extended periods of times during a backup. So one of the best examples is Hurricane Katrina in 2008 or 9, I believe was when it was, somewhere around there. A lot of different places down in Louisiana were greatly impacted by this. We sent hundreds of generators down there at that time. All were, not all of them, but a large majority of them that were installed were running for weeks, if not months, on backup power supply, mainly diesel oriented, because the grid was actually down during that time. I know you're familiar with that.
I experienced that firsthand, so yeah, unfortunately.
And so with that, the main difference between, there's 3 ratings. So there's prime, standby, and continuous. And so with that being said, continuous is basically reserved for 24/7 duty, 365 days a year. That's really more natural gas based. It's really reserved for that versus prime and standbys, diesel, and also incorporates natural gas with that. Prime is going to be, it can be anywhere from 8 hours a day to 24 hours a day. It really just depends on how you're using it, but the sizing of the equipment is really where that's going to be. Stationary backup power supplies is really based around, again, what you're looking to be able to back up. And that's really a conversation you need to have with your electrical engineer or like the electrician that you have when you're doing the installation of what is your demands for your requirements for that job site or business. And what are you looking to be able to do? Are you looking to 100% run that business like nothing ever happened with no power out during extended periods of time? You're probably going to want to upsize that generator a little bit versus just going bare bones across the board to keep the server up and running or just some basic electrical functions.
Okay, interesting. What are some of the major mechanical risks that come up if you do, unfortunately, if you do choose to run your backup system as a prime location? We speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the major factors that happens is it's called the heat dissipation on the alternator end winding. Most of the engines are actually going to be totally fine during the capabilities of this, but as you run something, especially in like a hotter environment or a colder environment, that alternator end is actually going to start to heat up. The longer it's running, there's a couple different things, winding, statings can start to melt or break, and during those applications, it really just depends on the size. You can even get into the C-rise of the alternator end as well if you wanted to. But it can start to have some mechanical failures on the electrical end. Obviously, during that time period, if you are running it 24/7 for an extended period of time, you're still going to want to maintenance it. So there's going to be a small period of time where it's going to have to shut down. Just like if you're driving your car, you got to get it serviced every 5,000 miles.
Yeah.
Same thing with generators. On every 250 hours is what we recommend to have it serviced. So about every 10 days, if you're able to shut it down for 3 or 4 hours, so get a good service in there to make sure it's up and running, is greatly going to save you on the longevity of that piece of equipment.
Until that point too, don't forget your fuel.
It could be a little important.
Yeah, if it's running like that, I feel like we've had phone calls and scenarios where it's ran out of gas, which is going to cause more issues down the line as well.
especially if you're thinking about more of a prime location with the diesel system. Like
Oh,
you're gonna have to
sure.
keep that fuel piece in mind, especially if there's like an event that comes through like a hurricane. You're gonna have to refill that fuel if your system does get going and transfer over. So yeah, interesting. Let's kind of focus on wet stacking specifically with diesel systems. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit. We did cover this, I think, in the last episode briefly. But since you both are here, I think you're both really great individuals perspective to have on this topic. So let's do like a quick summary for the people listening right now watching. What is wet stacking? How does it impact a generator system specifically?
Well, to me, wet stacking to me is super simple, but it's when we don't size a generator properly for the diesel and it's not running at the capacity where it needs to be running at that 80%. And therefore it starts messing with the components because it's not working to its ability.
Yeah. So on a very high level, yeah, that's exactly it. So basically wet stacking is when the generator is oversized for the application. What ends up happening is too much fuel is getting lodged in the system. And so it starts to actually create some buildup inside of the exhaust. And so with that, and it is actual fuel that gets built up inside of the exhaust, what can happen there is it can greatly damage the actual equipment itself. It can cause some other things, like once that fuel does decide to burn off in the exhaust, you can have flames literally coming out of the exhaust.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I have seen customers do that. It is frightening for everybody. The fire department, get football. Nobody wants that. So the generic rule of thumb is you want to always size your generator based around 30 to 80% of the application, if you're going to be running with that. So anything below 30, diesel does not like it. That diesel engines do not like running slow. They like running hard and they like running fast and they like running long, right? So they're kind of your endurance piece of equipment. They want to be fed. They just want to run forever. And that's typically what is the best option for them. However, if you do undersize it, you have to have that risk of it. So just play that safe factor with it. Kind of going back to what I previously said, you want to oversize your piece of equipment if you're trying to run it in a 24/7 application. The rule of thumb with that is, hey, if you're just oversize at 25%, and you're going to stay within that 30 to 80% range. So if you have 100 kW, getting a 125 isn't actually always going to be the worst thing for you. It can actually increase the longevity of that because you're running it closer to let's say that 60 to 80% range. And so you're going to it's going to just be coasting the entire time. You're not going to have any worries about heat dissipation on the alternator end. The engine's going to love it. You're going to have a much more fuel efficient piece of equipment as well.
And how does derating how does that layer into this conversation too? Especially like for us here with altitude difference across the entire nation, for instance. How does that affect all of this?
Yeah, so derating it can be a kind of a complicated subject to get into. Couple main factors that you want to play into is one, obviously, like you said, the altitude. Higher or lower elevations play different factors. Humidity is one, air density, those types of things. And so the best thing to do is just judge it by the manufacturer spec sheet of what that derate is. They're traditionally always listed on there for every, let's say, 10,000 feet above that. For every 1,000 feet above that, it derates by 1%.
Okay.
So you just want to reference the OEM guidelines based around that engine is the best factor to do it. The further down you go in sea level, there's usually not too many issues with it. I mean, humidity, ambient air temperature, heat, those types of things can play a factor into it. However, it's definitely more effective the higher up you go in elevation.
Okay, interesting. Kind of changing the angle just a little bit for the. I wanted to briefly talk about continuous applications with natural gas systems. There is this. I don't want to say it's a theme going on, but there is this small trend going on across. I think it is global at this point, from what I'm saying, where a lot of businesses are trying to get off the grid. For instance, natural gas tends to be a really great option for that, depending on how much power you need, where you're at. What types of applications are you guys hearing this being utilized in? And is there, I know we're not, we don't work for the utility companies directly, but is there a major cost difference between moving to an off-grid system, let's say it is a continuous nat gas kind of setup, versus staying on the grid with a backup system, for instance?
Well, nat gas isn't going to be off-grid.
Okay.
That
is true.
They still have to get it.
Yeah.
So, for a full off-grid application, natural gas is not the option. They'd have to go with a diesel to be fully sustainable on themselves.
Okay.
But to that point, the trends right now for natural gas continuous use are going to be data centers.
Yeah.
Is a huge one. They're very popular right now between the Bitcoin mining,
to relying on the utility provider so much for the
Technically, you can be off-grid with natural gas. And so typically, like when we see applications like that, it's directly from a wellhead. And so and by wellhead, it's literally coming from the ground up and going into a piece of equipment. The issues most people run into there is you need additional pieces of equipment, so it's such as something called a scrubber. Generators, there's two types of engines: lean burn and rich burn engines. But with that, in the context of natural gas engines, that scrubber takes that the gas literally coming out of the ground and creates it and scrubs whatever it doesn't need into it, and then translates that into a usable source of natural gas that the engine can actually run on.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, to Caitlin's point, back in the early, let's say from 2020 to about 2023, this was a major push in our industry for Bitcoin mining. There's a absolute ton of natural gas coming directly from wellheads that were being utilized or underutilized because of the initiative. There were the no flare burn anymore.
That's right.
Yeah. That's kind of gone away, to be honest with you. I think a lot of that's just due to Bitcoin mining has kind of dropped in popularity since COVID because nobody had anything to do and everybody wanted to make millions of dollars. Now we're safely out of that environment at this point, I believe. However, it is still a source. There are some companies that are starting to build, to Caitlin's point, data centers and stuff like that are closer to wellhead supplies, and so they can go a little bit more off-grid.
Okay.
We're also seeing it in manufacturing opportunities as well. Traditionally, those are going to be closer to a main source or the main pumping station. They're going to be very, very close. I mean, we're talking single miles away, if not hundreds of feet away sometimes from that main pumping station that can fully go off-grid. The cost analysis behind that gets extremely complicated, to be honest with you. Yeah. It really comes down to a cost per kW, because that's ultimately how the grid or your utility provider is basically giving you that analysis. And then you're not going to break even for an extended period of time, just to be completely transparent, because you have to make an upfront investment of potentially millions and millions of dollars to be able to come back with that. So it really just comes down to, hey, what does your business need and what is that application? When would this make sense? And is it an investment that your company is willing to make? For us here at Generator Source, it's not something we will ever do. It doesn't make sense for our business. However, we're not a manufacturing plant. We're not producing billions of dollars of worth of materials or objects every single year to where that's something we need to do a cost analysis on. But your business could possibly need it, and we'd love to be able to help you out with that.
Awesome. It does. That's great information. I didn't even know some of that. So, fantastic. Talking about the cost analysis for diesel versus natural gas, it's been very high level perspective servicing these units. What are some of the major differences between the service side of things, maintenance for these units between the two systems?
I mean, to Dakota's point, they're still going to go on that same 250-hour interval, but cost difference. I mean, sampling should cost less on a natural gas. We're not doing fuel samples. We're not doing, right?
Yeah. So the sampling is the cost analysis almost becomes irrelevant at that point, to be honest with you. Okay. The cost is almost about the same. So if you're doing a 500 kW natural gas and a 500 kW diesel, the only sample that we're not taking is a fuel sample, to Caitlin's point. However, with that being said, remember what I said earlier in the conversation, that 500 kW engine is going to be a much larger engine, so it's going to actually require more oil. So you're losing one sample, but you're putting in more oil. Filters wise, they're relatively the same. There's not really much changing that. If you're not changing diesel fuel filters, obviously, on a natural gas unit, there's some other things in the line there, but you are using more oil. So, I mean, cost analysis wise, I would say it's a fraction of a margin percentage between the two. We're willing and able to do both. However, from a cost standpoint, again, it kind of comes down to just application and what's the best for you. You can extend the life of the oil life in a natural gas equipment just a little bit longer because of how cleanly it burns. Yeah. You can actually change the oil in a natural gas unit and it looks brand new coming out, just like you're putting it in. That's how clean these things burn. Versus diesel, as soon as it runs and it turns over once or twice, it's black. It's just always going to be black. Like, that's just what diesels do.
Yep.
But in the grand scheme of things, the cost is a very minimal perspective on that. And the load banking is pretty much the exact same process. Load banking is load banking, but servicing is, there's just minimal variances between the two.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. And in terms of let's say like ROI, total resale value of the unit itself, we do a lot of purchasing here. Obviously, we do a lot of used equipment. Are there any two really big differences between the overall resale value between diesel versus natural gas system for the same capacity?
I think it just goes back to like we talked about with the cost of it being more on the initial purchase. But as far as the resale value, I don't feel like a natural gas holds more value than the diesel one. I feel like they're very comparable when we're purchasing that equipment.
Okay.
It's about our inventory too.
Yeah, and I would say the first leveling factor is going to be market trends. So right now what we're seeing is a large quantity of natural gases hit the market. And I think that going back to the earlier part of the conversation is that's kind of an economic base and where we're at. The same thing kind of happened during 2020, 2021 with COVID. A lot of people were scared of the state of what was happening with the world and the economy and everything like that. And being that a natural gas has to be connected to the grid, a lot of people were changing out natural gas units and putting diesel units back in.
Yeah.
And so with that, it really just depends on if there's a large quantity of them coming out, then that means the market's going to get flooded. It's going to decrease the value of that equipment. Thus, we can buy it cheaper. On the flip end of that, though, we're typically able to buy natural gas equipment a little bit cheaper on the used market and sell it a little bit cheaper versus if you were to go to an OEM and buy it brand new. On average, our equipment used-wise sells about 50-60% natural gas for the natural gas side specifically. So 50 to 60% cheaper than if you were to go directly to an OEM for a branded piece of equipment. The diesel units are always going to be in demand. For the last 43 years since we've been in business, it's been our main driver of business. It's not going away because there are so many more applications with that not being connected to a grid and everybody having that self-sustainability factor.
Okay, interesting. I know there's I don't want to get too in deep with the state of the energy crisis kind of globally happening right now because everybody's being impacted differently. But are there any? It's basically we're hitting like month 2 of Q2 right now in 2026. So the Iran war is going on right now overseas. In terms of the global market, access to fuel and how the market's moving this and how it's reacting to everything. What are some of the things you guys are you hearing anything at all in terms of the impacts from the customer side of things with all this going on and all, and how can our customer base and individual listener right now, how can they stay vigilant, resilient to plan ahead and be prepared for whatever might come in the near future?
Just from what I'm listening to on calls and hearing, while what's happening is negative, it's not negatively impacting our business in the sense of we sell power and people still need power.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like we've been negatively impacted in any way other than needing to help our customers.
Yeah. So according to the DOE, the Department of Energy, the grid's been in a critical state for about the last 10 years. Getting a new power plant built takes on average 10 to 15 years. And that's just to build it. It takes about 15 years of approval before then. So that's why we don't see any new power plants going up throughout the nation, unfortunately. Hopefully somebody can get that to change much, much higher in the government. No idea who's responsible for that, but also at the same time, please don't change it because that's all our business. So, but with that being said, one of the big factors, obviously, I think anybody who's been to a gas station recently has seen the cost of fuel.
Oh, yeah.
I do drive a diesel truck. That's obviously part of my role and responsibility as in the company to kind of represent the brand. Diesel's gone up it's about $5 a gallon right now.
Yeah.
Nobody's really thrilled about that. However, with that being said, natural gas is also going up. Nobody's talking about that because you're not using it every single day like you do. You use it every single day, but it comes in a nice little bill at the end of the month that you're just like, okay, I guess I got to pay this, or I don't have heat in my house or air conditioning, whatever it may be. That's definitely an uncomfortable factor, and we feel you. And we're definitely here for our customers with that. If there was a way we could mitigate that, we would love to. Unfortunately, with the economic crisis that's happening with the Strait of Hormuz and Venezuela and everything else that's going on, that's not necessarily in any of our control. However, the demand for power is insatiable. You need power. We all need power for everything in our lives at this point in time. It's going to be there. The best time to buy a generator was yesterday, just to be completely transparent. If you want to be able to get ahead of all of this, start looking at it now, and it's going to reap benefits for you in the future. It may, like I said before, it's an upfront cost. However, it's a massive insurance check that you get to write for yourself to make sure your business and your employees have somewhere to come and work, and you have a sustainable future for your life and your family.
Yeah, the state of the demand is increasing every week, every day at this point, pretty much, and being ahead of the game as much as you possibly can is very critical. And that being said, too, it's great to find a partner like Generator Source to be able to create this whole cradle to grave kind of partnership. So that way, we're handling not only the finding the equipment for you, the install, the servicing, and everything else followed up. Can you guys speak a little bit how our teams across all of our regions are positively impacting all these different types of end users and clientele, and what are you guys hearing in terms of the needs from like this valuable partnership experience that we're actually seeing, like a lot of the OEMs are just kind of dropping the ball. I'm hearing, at least, between with relationships with their established service clients, for instance, with delayed timelines, significantly increased costs for parts, things like that. What are you guys hearing, and how are we here to help them?
I mean, all of our branches are great. And one thing we do, to Dakota's point of this insatiable need, is our job is to help with their insurance policy. Their generator is their insurance policy. And we do that with our service and our rental and our sales and our purchasing and all these other departments. And so I think with like we said, the negative impact of the world right now, we're still very positive because we are helping every day with whatever the needs are of our customers.
Yeah. No, awesome.
Yeah, we have 4 branches nationwide that are fully equipped to be able to help you with any of your backup power needs. Anything from service, rental to sales, whatever your business is requiring, we're able to stand here and help you. We have 24/7 support in all 4 locations. If you need somebody outside of those 4 locations, we're willing to make some phone calls for you guys to make sure, or pass along contact numbers that we have to make sure you're getting in contact with the people that are. Currently, I mean, that's where we are. However, in the next 3 or 4 years, I hope to be saying we have 16, 20 different branches nationwide.
Cool.
That'll be amazing. It'll be a lot for all of us to take on as a team, but it's going to be very exciting for the future. We're willing to help you out. I mean, if you're not looking for an immediate backup power supply for your business, we offer the rental option too, which is a less of an upfront cost and investment for you. If you need help sizing that and getting equipment out there, understanding your needs and capabilities, we have service experts that are willing to walk the site with you to kind of sit down and understand your needs and your concerns for your business. Yeah. And we can help address everything from there and get you everything you need.
Absolutely.
And what are some of the positive benefits for choosing a holistic partner like Generator Source versus the one-offs, having to do every single thing individually, find this and that? What are some of the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit is just the ease of mind. You get to call us, you get to be able to have one point of contact for everything that's happening with your project and your business and your power demand. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't really like making 7 different phone calls to get one project taken care of. I like to have one point of contact, knowing like that's my project manager. They're going to get this done. I have the ease of mind because they've been in business for 43 years. They know what they're doing, and we have the trusted partners in different areas to be able to get that accomplished for you.
It's funny you brought up the phone call because I was thinking the same thing, that if we are talking to a customer and we don't have the answer, we have 4 branches with almost 100 employees. Someone's going to have the answer, and we're going to figure it out because we can rely on each other.
We have a very quality team here, very knowledgeable, skilled. I mean, our technicians have 30, 40, 50 years of experience now at this point. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, we have technicians at every location. Our master tech here in Brighton has been with us for 36 years. We have a technician down in Florida that's been doing it for 20 plus years. We have another technician down in Texas that's been doing it for 20 plus years as well.
Yeah.
Just having that trusted, stable partner of saying, hey, this isn't just somebody that decided to do this yesterday. They've been doing this for a few decades. Adds a lot of ease of mind to our customers. And I want them to know, like, hey, when you come to work with us, we're your family at that point, because we understand that this is part of your business and your livelihood. We want to help you out, and anything we can do to do that, we're going to stand by you.
Perfect.
I agree.
Couple questions for you guys. This is more of a personal perspective. Audiences who are listening right now who have backup generator systems or prime power, whatever their applications are, versus individuals who are just now starting to do the research, just starting to understand their needs, that they need a generator, that they're starting to feel the impacts of the grid and whatnot. What is the main, from your personal perspective, difference between being compliant versus being resilient with your backup power systems?
I feel like the customer's first step is to call us. because we're going to need to know if they're being compliant or resilient. Why do they need this? What are we, helping ensure? Like, what is the reason?
Yeah.
And then once we can find that out, then we can dig into more of the requirements and get them in touch with, if it's in Florida, one of our partners down there to go help size. There's so much, but it starts with that first phone call. Like, we want to help you. So just call us. And if you don't know, we'll find out together.
What does being resilient look like for one of our customers?
I would say it goes back to that old adage is if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, right? Yeah. And so with that, it's going to be a basis of, hey, if you find yourself in a situation that's extremely unfortunate where you're out of power and you desperately need it, that plan, because you don't have the plan and you don't have the basic understanding of what is exactly needed, it's going to take 2 to 10x longer to be able to get all the information to us versus just initially let's gather some information together. It doesn't mean you have to buy anything. Let us help inform you, but let's help create a plan for that, because when this happens, it's usually not it's usually completely random. Unfortunately, a lot of it is based around whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes or fire base. Unfortunately, here in Colorado, it's usually a very emergency type situation. So that's why you see a lot of these data centers, the hospitals, like and I mean small emergency care centers even, they all have backup power supplies because they want to make sure that there is no failure, especially in life and death situations. So you don't want to find yourself in that situation.
It's almost like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. It's being reactive versus proactive.
Just about to say that. Yeah, thank you guys for joining us today for this third episode of Load Bank Report. Hopefully we can do another one with you guys, kind of digging in deeper to some of these, some of the questions our customers are giving us every single day now through the website. There are phone calls that you're going through every single day. It's all exciting stuff. I know everybody loves hearing, especially from both of you guys. So, perfect. Thank you guys so much for taking time to talk to me and talk to our audiences too, to answer a few questions that we've been getting. But until next time.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Appreciate it.